This happened quite a few years ago. My mom and I were home alone for a few days because my father was traveling. On a Friday night, I got home at about 10 o'clock because I had a late shift. I ate a snack and went to bed because I was beat. Because it was Saturday, I slept in, and by the time I got up, my mom had already left the house to run errands. When I opened my bedroom door, something immediately caught my eye. There were 3 dark footprints on the floor leading right past my door and going down the hallway and heading past my mother's room. At first, I thought my mom might have done some gardening and tracked some dirt inside from the backyard. But when I looked closer, the footprints seemed so much larger than her foot. They looked like they came from a man's shoe, maybe even boots, and they were large, maybe size 12 or 13. That's when I got a little scared. Someone had been in our house during the night and I was alone. My heart began to immediately beat faster. I'd left my cell phone on the counter in the kitchen to charge. I knew it was irrational, but I stepped back into my room and shut the door. I wasn't sure what to do, but I listened as hard as I could to see if I could hear anything. Footsteps or someone outside my door breathing. I continued to listen and was close to hyperventilating. That's when I heard the sound of a door opening and then shutting. That was followed by footsteps. They were distant at first, but they started coming toward my room. I shrank back, trying to find a place to hide. My heart felt like it was about to beat out of my chest when the door flew open and I nearly screamed. That's when my mom stepped into the room. I almost fainted. She came into my room and acted like I was crazy. I asked her if she saw the footprints, but she hadn't seen anything at all. In fact, when I went into the hallway, the footprints were gone. My mom had walked through them and probably brushed them away with her feet. No matter how hard I tried to convince her they were there, she didn't believe me. She insisted the house was locked up tight. She even took me around to each door, and they were locked. She said what I saw was probably just dirt smudges and my imagination was running wild. But when I went back into the hallway, all I saw was some dirt on the floor, and by then it looked like dirt spots instead of footsteps. I didn't know what I thought any longer. Maybe I'd been a little hazy when I got up. Later in the day, I checked one of the patio doors and it was unlocked. I'm not sure if my mom had gone out that door and left it unlocked during the day, but when I went outside and walked around the house, I saw the imprint of a boot in the dirt just outside my window. I went back inside and insisted that someone had been outside my room, but my mom always had an explanation. I made sure the house was locked up tight that night and double-checked all the locks. I even slept with a hammer under my pillow. The next night, someone broke into the house next door and assaulted the neighbors, putting the husband in the hospital. I truly felt like I had dodged a bullet that night. This happened back in the 1980s, so it was very much a pre-cell phone era. I was in high school at the time. One night after dinner, my dad suggested that we take a walk around the neighborhood, just a walk off dinner. My sister and mom were watching TV, and they opted to stay home, so it was just us boys. We lived out in the fringes of the suburbs in a subdivision that was semi-rural. There were few houses, but no street lights, and the police rarely patrolled our area. Some of the neighbors kept their porch lights on, but many did not. So in places, our walk was pretty dark. Plus a heavy fog had descended on the area, making the whole place seem really murky. Anyway, our walk around the block was a little over a mile in total. As I said, it was dark out and there was very little or no moonlight. My dad had picked up a small flashlight going out the door. It wasn't all that bright, but without it, we couldn't see much more than a few feet in front of us. We joked that it was like we were out on some old country moors and that werewolves were afoot. My dad even let out a fake howl just to be funny. When cars came by, my dad would use the flashlight as a signal to make sure they saw us, but there really weren't too many cars. Just as we walked around a long looping corner on our street, which marked the halfway point, we suddenly heard footsteps behind us. This was a bit weird as we'd just come down that way and hadn't seen or heard anyone walking on the street or coming down their driveways as we passed. But we figured it was just some neighbors also out for a walk, and we hadn't noticed them in the dark. So I turned around to look and switched the flashlight on to see who it was. The fog was too thick and it was so dark, I could only make out some dark forms. At least it looked like there was more than one person. It was hard to see, but it could have been 3 people. They didn't say anything. We kept walking, but the footsteps seemed to speed up from behind us. And they sounded heavy, so we thought it was probably bigger men. Somehow between my father and I, we communicated without speaking. It was time to speed up. I turned the flashlight back, but just like before, it was too dark and hazy to make out any details, other than they looked very large. Some silent communication passed between my father and me as we got closer to the house, and we sped up even faster. By the time we got to the driveway, we were nearly running. Our driveway is nearly 100 feet long, but that night it seemed like a mile. Once we made it halfway up, I turned around and heard the footsteps moving away as whoever it was had veered away from us to the other side of the road and just kept going. Not one of the figures ever spoke, but I felt this sense of menace coming from them, as if they planned to do something dangerous. When we got to the house, my dad said it was probably just some neighbors. Just to be sure, my brother and I got in my car and drove around the road to see who it was, but we didn't find anyone. We went around all the roads and no one was walking on them. It was as if whoever had been there had just disappeared. I was driving home late one night after leaving work when I noticed a car behind me switch from the left lane to the lane that I was in. There was nothing suspicious about that, but it did catch my eye because that particular lane change was really quick and it was somewhat dangerous. But I passed it off as maybe they were just trying to avoid something in the road. I kept going along and I took a couple turns and the car was still behind me but at a distance. After a few minutes, it flashed its brights at me while keeping a distance, so I thought maybe something was wrong with my car. My exit was quickly coming up, and the car sped up behind me, put its blinkers on after I did too. Again, it's not inherently suspicious, but maybe this person was going the same way I was. The first light after the exit was yellow, and I made it through. But the other car behind me, it sped up and it had to run the red light to stay behind me. At this next light, I think, okay, this is still a main and busy road. It's probably just a coincidence. I'm getting closer to home by now, so I'm taking just the familiar path, a right, a left, a right. And then I look up and the car is still behind me. And by this point, I'm starting to panic a little bit that I'm being followed. Instead of going straight home, I decide to pass by it and I take a right turn. The car does the same thing too. By now, I am very scared that I'm being followed by some sort of creeper or someone dangerous. I drive up one block, turn right. We're in a smaller neighborhood now. I continue on, and the driver is still behind me. It's dark at night, and there's no one around, and the closest police station is a good mile or two away. I consider calling 911, but I wondered what I would say. Someone was following me? Maybe they'd think I was crazy. By then I'm freaking out. I'm trying to decide where to go next. I consider going maybe to a grocery store parking lot or to a police station. By now, I've driven out of my neighborhood and I'm in a more rural area, and I'm feeling very, very vulnerable and isolated. I continue watching my rear view, and the driver is still behind me. There was no chance that this was a coincidence. Fortunately, I'm very familiar with the area, and I know there's a couple places that I might be able to get away from this person. There's a sharp turn coming up, followed by a hidden driveway. I punch the gas and I speed up, practically skitter around the corner, and then gun the engine. I'm going almost 60 by now, and the hidden driveway's coming up. I slam on my brakes and slide around the corner into the driveway, turn off my lights, and just wait there. I watch in my mirror. Suddenly I see lights pass by the end of the driveway. I look down the road and see the lights disappear. I slowly turn around, got back onto the road, popped my lights back on, and drove home, sweating all the way. I truly felt like I was in danger that night and had barely escaped it.